Hi, everybody, and welcome to Iran Book Show on this Wednesday afternoon or evening if you're on the East Coast. I'm still in California, as you can tell, in my hotel room. And thank you for joining me this afternoon. It's interesting to see we're doing the shows in different times, different time zones, different times. It's interesting to see the kind of the patterns of people watching. It doesn't seem like the number of live views is affected too much by the time of the show, which is interesting, right? I mean, maybe that means I should do the show. I shouldn't do the show so late in the evening. Do you guys listen to the show at work? So if I do it during the day, would you listen during the day from work? So I'm curious. What would be the time of day on the East Coast or on the West Coast or whatever that would optimize live viewership, and maybe we'll start making some changes on the Iran Book Show to accommodate that. All right, today we're going to talk about state secrets. Should there be any? Under what circumstances? What is a secret? What isn't a secret? Second, we'll talk about some updates on ESG, because we've talked a lot about ESG on the show. I'll give you some updates about BlackRock and about what's going on more broadly with the ESG right now. And finally, we'll talk about the CDC restructuring itself. That'll be interesting in its conclusions about its failures during COVID. The CDC today announced that it is going to restructure, so we can address that. All right. And then let's see, what else? Yes, from yesterday's show, or the day before yesterday, I have a bunch of Super Chat questions I did not get to because the internet connection just died towards the end of the show. So I promise I will get to those questions, assuming we don't die today, that I will get to those questions today. So stay tuned. Of course, also open to new Super Chat questions and to your support of the show. We have a target of about $650 a show, which we didn't meet last time. I think primarily because we got cut off too early. We were on our way there and got cut off. But we'll see how we do. We'll see how we do today. All right, just one more comment before we jump into the actual topics, and that is, it was interesting that the Civil War show that I did 2 days ago has got a lot of views. People are quite interested and excited by it, and that's interesting. It's both scary, frightening, and concerning that people actually have civil war on their mind, and this is something that they're interested in, that they're concerned about, that they're afraid of, or whatever it happens to be. But it's real. So I think that's clear. The comments kind of all over the place, but I think some people were like shocked that this is even an issue. I don't know where they've been hiding. I mean, it seems like almost every day somebody in the media, on the right or on the left, is mentioning the possibility of a civil war. This has been around with us for the really since Biden's election, but certainly it seems to accelerate as soon as Trump victimhood accelerates. It's highly correlated with Trump victimhood, but. So it's out there. It's something people are talking about, and as I said, I don't believe it's going to happen. Not in the sense of, if you think about a civil war as the original Civil War, the original American Civil War, with two armies stacked up against each other and fighting. The only way that would happen is in a scenario where there was significant secession, and where some states aligned against other states. It's not clear what that alignment would look like. It's not clear who would secede. And then how do you secede? I mean, think about the fact that California maybe one of the most leftist states in the country in many respects. Well, 45% of the people living in California are staunch Republicans, many of them super conservatives. What are they going to do? Is California just going to be able to secede based on 50% of the population being left? How leftist are the 50%? Are they so leftist that they would want to secede? Are they moderately left? Are they just anti-Republican? I mean, there's some wacky left, but what percentage of California is really wacky left? Probably pretty small. If you go to Texas, I mean, Beto, whatever his name is, almost beat Ted Cruz the Senate race. So one has to assume like 45% of Texas are Democrats. Certainly a vast majority of Austin, Texas are Democrats. So, are we going to do population swaps? I mean, is that realistic? Is that really going to happen? Conservatives and Republicans are not leaving California en masse, not by the millions, which is what would be required. Remember, California is the most populous state in the country. Same is true. Democrats are not leaving en masse yet. Texas. So a civil war here, the complexity of it is dramatic because the civil war is inside the state. So secession is an interesting talking point. People like to talk about it. People like to rile it up. There are some states that are dominantly Republican or dominantly Democrat, but those are small, insignificant states that are unlikely to secede and certainly unlikely to get involved in a civil war for their secession. They're just too small to survive. The only states that really count in terms of civil war, states like California, New York, California, maybe Florida. So, and again, even in Florida, right now, I just saw a poll. The polls are saying that the Democratic senatorial candidate is ahead of Marco Rubio by 4 points. I doubt she's going to win, but again, it suggests that Florida is what? 50-50, 55-45, 52-48? I don't know exactly. But it's not 90-10. It's not 80-20. So how does this break? I mean, part of the problem with a secession-based civil war is that the population is not neatly arranged to facilitate such a war. And the war is internal. And that's why I strongly believe that we're not going to see a civil war, but we are going to see increased political violence. That is, and that doesn't require numbers. So political violence can be increased just by the 1/10 of 1% at each end of the political spectrum. The collectivist right and the collectivist left. At each end of those spectrums, you can get that 1% creating a lot of havoc, a lot of destruction, a lot of death, a lot of mayhem. And I think that is much more likely, right? I think that's more likely than an actual civil war where people are in the streets fighting one another, with guerrillas out in the woods, with their missile attacks and airplanes or whatever. I just don't see that happening in the United States. I think we're going to have political violence. I think that political violence ultimately will lead to greater and greater authoritarianism. And I think, sadly, that the outcome for the United States is likely to be just succumbing to authoritarian government, just giving in, just collapsing into and accepting and passively accepting authoritarianism. And I don't think we're that far away in the U.S. And I think that's the outcome much more than it is an actual hot, battle-driven, if you will, civil war. Those were my thoughts about civil war that I wasn't sure we fully kind of covered and articulated 2 shows ago. So I wanted to get that in before we went on. All right. Okay, let's see. Let me just do this. All right. Let's see. So let's talk about state secrets. Obviously, this is a big issue that with regard to the documents Trump might or might not have had, or the documents Trump might or might not have misused over his presidency. A lot of stories are coming out that is interesting, and it always brings up whenever these stories break about top secret documents here, secret documents here, classified there. What should be classified? What should be top secret? To what extent should information be withheld from the American people? I mean, for example, give you a bunch of examples. I don't know, there's still files on the Kennedy assassination, was it now, 60 years ago, that have not been released. There are all kinds of files, the UFO files that the Air Force has been holding that for years and years and maybe decades were not released, and it's not clear they're all being released today. There are all kinds of, we still have in the United States, we still have secret courts, which is a feature of the worst kind of authoritarian governments. And yet we still have secret courts in the United States. These FISA courts that are supposed to determine whether the NSA can spy on American citizens or not. I think part of the original Trump FBI scandal in post 2016 related to the use of FISA courts to get warrants to listen in. Should we have FISA courts? Should we have secret courts? There's all kinds of military documents. I'm sure there are assessments of the war in Afghanistan, assessments of maybe even going back to Vietnam that is still considered classified and secret and being withheld from the American public. And then every one of the agencies, every one of our regulatory agencies. Now there is generally the ability of citizens to ask for the release of information. And the press, this should be a big part of what the press in a free society does, is demand that the government release information and more information and more information. But there's a general acceptance, both in the legal field and in politics and among the public, that it's okay for the government to have lots of secrets from us. And I'd argue that it's not. That the number of things that actually should be secret should be very, very small. They should relate to certain technologies that might give our enemies an advantage over us if they were disclosed. They should relate certainly to military strategies that again might give our enemies an advantage over us. And they should relate to anything that has to do with agents in the field and methods of collecting information, intelligence, that legit methods, not illegit methods, but legit methods of collecting information about our enemies that, again, we don't want to disclose. In other words, the principle here is that other than information that is clearly going to help those who would hurt Americans, that would violate Americans' life, violate Americans' right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, other than information that could really damage our lives, damage our ability to live, pursue our happiness. So in the hands of our enemies, all other information should be public. There should be very little that is secret. Now, that doesn't mean there shouldn't be top secret documents at the Pentagon. There certainly should be, again, related to weapons, strategy, intelligence methods and people that involve in collecting information. But other than that, and certainly when it comes to anything historic, anything that does not put anybody in danger today, why aren't all government documents unsealed today from, let's say, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago? Weapons are not the same. Strategies are not the same. Our enemies are not the same. Spies in the field, there might be a few, but mostly they're different. Techniques probably changed. The government is our agent. It's not our boss. The government serves us. The government should not withhold secrets from us unless it is absolutely necessary in the protection of our rights. But that is the only standard that should be applied. Now, the things that are secret should be kept secret. The things that do put the lives and property of Americans at risk should be kept secret. And, if top secret information is mishandled, that is a bad thing because it puts our strategy, our people at risk. It puts our ability to wage war against our enemies at risk. And to the extent that anybody, Trump or anybody else, misuses classified information, they should suffer the consequences of it. And it's funny because Trump, when he was president, had no regard for actual classified information, for information regarding military secrets. I mean, in a number of occasions, he published secret satellite photos and other things that gave our enemies real information about our capabilities and gave them indications on ways in which they could, by knowing our capabilities, indications on which they could hide things from us. So they reduced the capacity of the US military to actually protect us. Trump was known for keeping confidential information, documents. He liked photographs and graphs, and he would keep them, and he wouldn't release them. And they used to do what they used to do in order to prevent him from doing that is in briefings, they used to present him with information in very big, like poster-size graphs and photographs, which were very difficult to keep, and he couldn't just put on his desk and leave. And so it's funny how the intelligence services were constantly trying to figure out how to prevent Trump from doing stupid things. I mean, I think that's true of most of his staff. I think the more rational, more adult, more competent people in Trump's staff were constantly trying to think of ways without getting into confrontation with him to prevent him from doing really, really stupid, dumb things. And I think the stuff, the books, the articles, the things that have been written about Trump by his own staff members who left, by people who are solidly conservative and solidly Republicans and solidly on that part, people who are respected within the intelligence community or the military community and so on. I think just the books that they have published, the articles they have published, the things that they have told us about how Trump ran the White House and how he ran the presidency is enough, I think, to disqualify him from office. I think just John Bolton's book is enough to disqualify him from office. It's truly. I mean, the guy's a moron, and he's not qualified to be president of the United States. He really isn't. Put aside the policies, just as a human being, as a personality, as a every piece of information we learn about what was going on in the White House suggests this guy is not qualified, right? And and you don't even need the background, right? You could see it up front. You could see it. You could see it in the way he treated our own intelligence agencies, and the way he treated his own people, and the way he treated foreign leaders. That this guy is not qualified. And whether he's better or not better, he's not qualified. We have to be honest about that. Then you can argue about who's better and who's not. But first, get rid of the people who are, All right. Let's see. What do we got here? We got a couple of super chats. I'll do these two, and then we'll go to the next topic. Friend Harper. So, bottom line on the state secrets should be very few. They should be related to national security only, and only to national security as it pertains to now and the future. It should never be about whether it makes the government look good or bad. It should never be about anything to do with any kind of information other than information that, again, puts the individual rights of American citizens at risk. Everything else should be public and should be easy to get to. And indeed, a healthy press, that's their focus, is to uncover and to ask questions and to go after, the people in power, and to make sure that we have all the information, that they're not keeping secrets from us, and that they're not being corrupt. So everything should be above board. Everything should be out in the open. There should be full disclosure and full transparency. And that's a goal that's going to be tough. It's tough to reach because our media is not interested in that. Our media is much more interested in supporting government power, increasing government power, and to some extent allowing them to keep secrets because it allows them to grow their power. All right, let's see. All right, so friend Harper writes, haven't been able to make it in a while, and unfortunately I can't stick around for this episode. Keep up the great content. I value the political economic topics that have been coming out lately. Have a wonderful evening. That's $50. Thank you, friend Harper. Really appreciate it. Stephen says, can a winner of a war be predicted in advance? In U.S. example, there were times that the side that wanted it more won, revolution, Vietnam, Afghanistan, and times that overwhelming industry and manpower won, civil. Yeah, I mean, different circumstances result in different outcomes, but that's part of what we talk about in predicting, right? You have to take those circumstances into account. So for example, in the Vietnam War, if you understood the fact that the Americans weren't really engaged enough to win, that the rules of engagement were such that really prohibited victory, that they made it very, very difficult for the United States to fight. If you notice that the United States refused, for example, to fight explicitly until late in the war, until Nixon and in the early 70s, to explicitly identify the North Vietnamese as the source of the trouble, and to view this as a war with North Korea. Instead, they viewed this as a terrorism war, an insurgency within South Korea. So you could have identified the key features that made it impossible for the United States to win that war. I don't think it's about wanting it more, but it's more than just about wanting more. It's about what you're willing to do to win. And I would say that the United States should and could win every single war it's fought, certainly since World War I, should have and could have won every single war it's fought, if it had wanted to win, and if it was committed to doing what was necessary to win. But for example, I predicted that we wouldn't win in Iraq and wouldn't win in Afghanistan. I predicted that in the 2000s. Not because we don't have a warming force, not because we don't have the capacity to win from a military perspective, but because we didn't have the will to do what was necessary to win. So that has to be a parameter within the calculation. If you look at Ukraine and Russia, part of the parameters that you have to take into account is the type of weapon systems, the supports, the kind of weapons each have, the size of the military, but also the will to fight and the capabilities of fighting. And if you know the quality of the generals and the quality of the strategy that each side deploys. And one of my points was early on that the Russian troops have no motivation to fight this war. It's not clear why they're fighting. I don't think they're completely bought into kind of the mystical Russian destiny that Putin has tried to impose on them, in the same way, in a sense that maybe German troops bought into Hitler's message. And Ukrainians are fighting for their homes, for their families, for their lives. So Ukrainians are going to be much more motivated than the Russians are. The Russians think they live in a free society, and why are they in a war with Ukraine? What's it got to do with them? Do they trust Putin enough? Is he as dominating over Russia as somebody like Hitler was over Germany? No. So big difference in motivation. Big difference in weapon systems that you identify. Russia is a bigger country, has more troops than Ukraine, more tanks than Ukraine. But Ukraine, while poor and without a lot of infrastructure to build weapons, has the support of the West. So you have to take that in. So you have to take all these things into account, and then you can make a prediction. And of course, predictions are not foolproof. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to be right. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to be that you're going to get it right. But to say that you can't make predictions because there's so many things going on, I think is a mistake. It's just that you have to take all the things, all the complexity into account when making a prediction. All right, that's Stephen. And then let's see. Yeah, quickly we'll do Shazbot, and then we'll get back to our topics. Shazbot asks, is it healthy to derive enjoyment from stories that focus on a character's ineptitude, such as the Pink Panther films? Yes, if the context is right, right? I mean, the Pink Panther is a comedy. The whole point of a comedy is, in a sense, to make fun and to focus on ineptitudes, there's a whole theory around humor and what does one laugh at. But you laugh at the unimportant, you laugh at the silly, you laugh at, in this case, ineptitudes, and that can be funny. What I don't like, what's unhealthy, is when you laugh at real virtues, when you laugh at competence, when you laugh at heroism, when you laugh at ability, when you laugh at beauty, right? That's wrong. That's unhealthy. But if you're laughing at, the insignificant in life, the trivial in life, the ineptitude in life, then I think that's fine. A heroic movie where the hero wins by accident. He's completely incapable. He's completely inept. He's completely useless, but he wins anyway because he's lucky or whatever. That would be a bad movie, right? So comedy functions differently in terms of what it provides us spiritually and in terms of how we react to it than does, for example, drama. They reflect different values in us, different. They're focused on different parts of our lives. All right. Let's see, where are we? Oops, why is that? All right, I want to get rid of that. Okay, just to remind everybody, those were super chats. All the ones I answered now are $20 and above. They always get priority. You can support the show and ask questions and get me to answer the questions on the show by using the super chat feature that's available for everybody on YouTube Live. So I will be answering $20 and above questions as we go through this, and then we'll run through the $5 and $10 questions afterwards. So let's quickly jump. We talked about state secrets. Let's now talk about ESG. So just want to give you an update, which I found interesting on the ESG front. We talked a lot about ESG, environment, society, governance, which is basically a means by which large financial institutions and through them governments and policymakers and different interest groups are putting pressure on corporations, on businesses, to follow a particular leftist, anti-human in my view, but particularly bad environmentalist policies, hiring policies with regard to DEI, diversity, something, and governance, which is about diversity in management, really. It's turned out and promoting so-called outside directors who know nothing and have no incentive, know nothing about a business and have no incentive around a business, promoting those kind of people to be outside directors or to be important players in the corporation. ESG is destructive to business. ESG is destructive to shareholders. ESG is destructive to making money. And people invest, people save in their pension, not primarily to facilitate political agenda. If they wanted to do that, there are specific funds that they can allocate their money to and say, I want to invest only in an ESG fund because those are my beliefs and that's what I want to do. Fine. Dumb, irrational, but fine. It's a free country. What I think I primarily object to is companies like BlackRock, which is the largest, institutional investor, I think, in the world. They run $10 trillion. And where BlackRock is saying ESG is going to be a factor that we consider in making investment decisions, not just in our ESG funds, not just in the funds that people have specifically chosen to be focused on ESG, but in our broad funds, in all of our funds, including funds that we run for pension plans. Now, so here I think BlackRock is violating their fiduciary responsibility as shareholders to their customers. The customers are giving them money, pension plans, with the idea that that money maximizes the return to the pensioner. The idea that that money on a risk-return basis is well invested for the sake of the pensioner. Pension plans should not be investing to achieve some social agenda. Individuals can do that. I don't think pensions have any right to do that. It's not their money. And again, they're violating their fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. But this is the problem. The problem is that pension plans, the largest pension plans in the United States today, are all government pension plans. These are state pension plans primarily, teacher union pension plans that are typically at the state level, government employees, state government employees pension plans. And the challenge there is that these pension plans are politicized. The governor of the state typically sits on their board. The governor of the state and the legislature kind of help guide them in terms of their investment decisions. And the poor government employees who get their pension from them are stuck with pension plans that are not primarily targeting, maximizing a risk return to the employees when they retire. They are stuck with plans that are now being, because they're politicized, are now being used in order to push for political agenda. Now you've got three layers here. Notice, you've got the pensioners, you've got the pension plan, and then the pension plan hires BlackRock to distribute the money to different companies to make the investments for them. And you've got the pension plan itself being political. It can put pressure on different boards of directors. It can put pressure on different companies to change their behavior in different ways by making direct investments. And then to the extent that they don't do that, they just invest in BlackRock mutual funds. BlackRock can then use what they do to put pressure on companies to fulfill their ESG mission, to change their board of directors, to put all kinds of restrictions on companies, not to maximize their shareholder wealth, but to take into account so-called stakeholders. Now, this is the problem. That because pension plans are state employees and because the state legislature and the government had a role in them, they are going to be politicized. And this is why I believe strongly that there should be no government pension plans. It should be illegal for the government to offer pensions for their employees. I mean, one of the problems is these funds become massive and become politicized, and they get involved in the market transactions and they distort them. Second, what happens if the pension plan makes bad investments? And when the pensioners retire, there's not enough money in the coffers. Well, it turns out that all these pension plans are structured in a way that if there's not enough money in the coffers, the state is liable for them. So that basically you have to raise taxes on people and redistribute wealth to make, to fill in the gap in the pensions. None of that is right. And it provides politicians with an incentive, huge incentive, to promise people massive pensions in the future, huge pensions in the future. And by the time the redistribution has to happen, to make, to live up to the promises. Those politicians are gone. There should be no government pensions. What they should do is what the private sector has moved into. If you notice, a lot of the private sector doesn't do pensions anymore. What they do is 401ks. And in 401ks, the individual employee gets to decide how to invest the money. It's his money, gets put into his account, and he gets to invest it. So that's how all pension plans should work at the state level. I mean, private companies could do what they want, but for government, and I think that's true of the military, I think that's true of all of them. You shouldn't guarantee people a pension. You should help them save for retirement. And you can help them save by retirement by allocating some money for a 401k, by matching their contribution to 401k, doing things like that. And then people will save as much as they want. They'll invest however they want. And you don't create these pools of money like CalPERS and CalSTRS in California, which become the largest investment groups. And then they hire somebody like BlackRock, which is $10 trillion now. So one of the things that I just was reading today is that BlackRock, we've mentioned BlackRock many times around this ESG. So the attorney generals of 19 states, I assume these are all Republican states, the attorney generals of 19 states have asked the SEC to look into BlackRock's ESG focus. And they basically asked them to look into this for two reasons. One relates to China, and this is just political. Is BlackRock favoring Chinese companies, particularly given that those companies are, flouting the environmental regulations, and yet BlackRock is claiming to be ESG, and the investment in these companies is consistent with that. I think that's a pretty shady thing for the attorney generals to go after. But more importantly is that they're questioning whether this focus on ESG is not a conflict in their fiduciary responsibility, in BlackRock's fiduciary responsibility, which I think is right on line. Now, this is my problem though. Why are the AGs doing this? Right? Again, this makes it a state issue, which politicizes the process. It brings in the SEC now to evaluate this. Is this the best way to evaluate these things? I mean, I understand if shareholders or actual customers of BlackRock sued BlackRock. But I'm against state pension plans because it by necessity makes it all political. What they should do is simple. What they should do is so simple and so straightforward and so obvious. And they won't do it. And all they have to do, all the state pension plans have to do, is pull their money from BlackRock. All they have to do is saying, we don't agree with your ESG strategies, BlackRock. We're taking your money and we're going to give it to Fidelity, or we're going to give it to, somebody else. We're going to manage it ourselves. I'm not sure why they need a BlackRock to manage it for them. We're going to do it some other way. Instead of bringing the SEC in and potentially having more regulations and they're not suing BlackRock yet, but maybe they'll sue them and that the whole court case and all of that. Just pull your money. That's the solution. Make BlackRock pay. And the best way to make them pay is to take your money away from them. It's to stop paying them fees. It's to stop supporting them. It's to stop giving them your sanction. Just pull your money. And I would say that to individual investors as well. To the extent that you're upset about BlackRock's ESG policy or any other company's ESG policy, don't use their ETFs. Don't use their mutual funds. Don't use them as a company. Pull your money. Send your money somewhere else. So it's sad, in my view, that attorney generals. I mean, it's such a simple, straightforward thing, and it would really, really, really hurt BlackRock in a way that an SEC investigation would not, if they actually just pulled it. They have an ERISA obligation, but you can fulfill that ERISA obligation with somebody else other than BlackRock. BlackRock is not the only player in town, right? So regulations complicate everything, right? Regulations complicate everything. And again, another good reason to get rid of state pension plans, because then you get rid of ERISA or that part of ERISA. But there's no reason to use a firm I'm not sure whose obligations to. BlackRock should be sued. I'm all for suing BlackRock. I just don't think it's attorney generals that should be suing BlackRock. I think it's their private investors should be suing BlackRock because they're violating the fiduciary responsibilities, ERISA, or under whatever applicable law it is. All right. So I wish the attorney generals would just pull their money. That's bottom line. All right, let's see. Let's see what the super chat situation is. Yeah, we're way behind, but all right, we still got plenty of time. So, whoops, it's already better than that. Let's copy paste it again. All right, we'll do these couple of $20 super chats, and then we'll talk about the CDC. All right, James asked, there's so much hatred and ugliness, decay out there, but I can't imagine an all-out civil war. There will probably be a lot more political violence like there was in the 70s. We're basically undoing the progress of Reagan. Yeah, I think that's right. And as bad as the 70s was, I fear that we're heading towards worse. I think we're going to have much more violence than we had in the 1970s. And I think it's going to be, it's much more tribal. So if you think about the 1970s, it almost all came from the wacky left. It almost all came from the new left. I'm trying to think if there was any political violence really from the right. I'm sure there was some. I'm not sure who killed, a lot of the political leaders who were killed were leftists, Martin Luther King and both Kennedys. But I have a feeling that if we have political violence again, this starting, in the next decade or so, it's going to be a lot worse than it was in the 70s. And I think it's going to be from both sides. And I think, just look at what I don't think happened in the 70s. Look at these guys who go into a Walmart and just pick people off and just kill people. That level of nihilism I don't think existed back then, and that willingness to just to shoot people. It's shooting people basically in the face is really personal, and it requires, a level of detachment, of evil, of nihilism, that even planting a bomb, you can somehow remove yourself from that. But when you're walking around just killing people, it's just truly shocking. So I don't know. We'll see. I have a sense that it's going to be worse than in the 70s. And I agree with you. What we've done over the last, I'd say, since the financial crisis, since the Bush years, the end of the Bush years, and maybe since 9/11, maybe it's really since 9/11, is we've undone what Reagan did, and undone it from the sense of the optimism Reagan brought, from the sense of freedom, the sense of confidence, also from the inclination towards market solutions. So if you think about, Reagan really shifted the American psyche, made it more optimistic, more confident, much more self-esteem, and focused solutions as, even though he didn't do a lot of this, but the orientation was markets. Markets are going to solve problems. And I think that survived until 9/11. And then post 9/11, everything became a government, and government grew and grew and grew. And we got 8 years of Bush, and then 7 years post 9/11. And then we got Obama with 8 years with growing the government. And then we got Trump for 4 years of growing government, and now Biden is off to the races again. So there's no question that the Reagan Revolution, the Thatcher Reagan Revolution are gone. And what's curious and interesting is that there seems to be, at least within the conservative movement in England, there seems to be an interest in returning to certain aspects of Thatcher. But there's no counter-revolution within the Republican Party. There's no Reaganite rise. There's no push towards resurrecting the spirit, the language, the spirit, and the inclinations, the policies of a Ronald Reagan within the Republican Party. I mean, some people think that DeSantis is that, but I don't think he can be, because I don't think the Republican base is about that kind of spirit. I think the Republican base is about anger and entitlement and frustration and hatred of the left. It's not about confidence and love of America and optimism about the future. I don't think any of that exists. And when Ronald Reagan says government is not the solution, it is the problem, I don't think the Republican base believes that anymore. I think they believe the government is the solution. So it is interesting that we're not seeing a revival of Reagan, and we need a Ronald Reagan. We need a Ronald Reagan. The 70s, I mean, it's hard to imagine what the 80s would have been if not for a Ronald Reagan-like figure. And for the deregulation, Jimmy Carter started before Reagan. Okay, Michael asks, Immanuel Kant was the world's first hacker. He saw flaws in the coding of the Enlightenment and unleashed a virus. Ayn Rand's antiviral software update is still in the loading phase. That's pretty clever. I like that. I think that's basically right. I think that's basically right. And it is still in the loading phase. And the network is not as fast as, because the network is about convincing people. And that takes time. And that is really hard as compared to just loading up an antivirus. All right, Shazbot, what's better, deviled egg or stuffed mushrooms with crab meat? God. I think I take the stuffed mushrooms with crab meat. $20. That was an easy answer for $20. All right. Final story of the day from my end is the restructuring of the CDC. Story today out that the head of the CDC is announcing a massive restructuring of the agency, that they recognize that they completely failed. They failed with COVID, and they're failing now with monkeypox, and that a complete restructuring is necessary and required, and they are putting certain things into place. There's a strategy. Great. It's certainly good to hear somebody admit their mistakes. Doesn't happen a lot on the chat on the chat of my show. And it doesn't happen a lot in our society, and it certainly doesn't happen a lot in government. The CDC messed up COVID almost as bad as one could imagine messing it up. It's hard to imagine doing a worse job than they did. I don't think it has to do with the specific personalities. I think it has to do with the fact that they don't know what their mission is, and they don't know what their job is, and it's not clear that the way their job and mission are defined makes the job possible. I think it sets it up for failure. We'll talk about that. I don't want to have to go through the whole series of errors and mistakes and failures of the CDC, and we probably don't even agree on what all of them are, but it's long, and it started from from the day COVID really was discovered to be an issue. From the day that the information was that there is a contagious coronavirus spreading in China and likely to become a global phenomenon, the CDC screwed it up from that day on. They got very little right. Now, part of that, without a doubt, is the fault of the Trump administration, the particular people, and primarily Trump, is stupidity, ignorance, and evasion in the first couple of months of this issue, primarily in January, February of 2020, where the keyword was evade, pretend it doesn't exist, and pretend it went away. But it's not just that. It can't just be blamed on Trump, even though Trump certainly played an important role of it. I mean, my view is that just on the basis of how Trump responded to COVID and how Trump managed he's the boss, right? How managed the COVID response. Just on that basis, he should never be president again. I mean, that is such a failure on such a scale that disqualifies you from the job that you were at, no matter what that job is. Again, but put that aside, even if you take out Trump, it wasn't Trump who forced the CDC to say, oh, no, you have to use our test. We don't allow private testing labs to design their own tests. It wasn't the CDC that finally, when they did produce their own test, it didn't work. That had nothing to do with the Trump. That had to do with the CDC. The CDC screwed up the test. And then the CDC screwed up testing. It screwed up, the purchase, the scaling up of testing. It completely messed up and provided the wrong guidance to states and localities about contact tracing and about everything that you're supposed to do, that the CDC knew was supposed to do in terms of dealing with the pandemic. Sadly, I think that the restructuring that was announced today about the CDC is nowhere near enough, because partially it does not really indicate what the purpose of the CDC is and what the scope of the CDC is. I think one of the biggest problems with the CDC is that its mission is way, way, way too broad. Because it starts and ends with the concept of public health. And it's not clear what public health really means. It's not clear that there is such a thing as public health. There is such a thing as a government's job and responsibility vis-a-vis contagious diseases. That, I think, you need a government function around that. You need somebody like the CDC to manage a response to a contagious disease, a deadly contagious disease. Not a regular contagious disease, but a deadly contagious disease. And none of this, by the way, has anything to do with experts or not experts or anything like that. I mean, you could be the world's biggest expert on anything. You can make mistakes. I mean, I don't get this, oh, yes, experts, that's the problem. No, I mean, we want experts. We love experts. If anything, we want better experts. Experts who make fewer mistakes. Experts who make better predictions. Life would halt to a stop if we didn't have experts. So this is not, slamming the CDC is not slamming experts. I think it's a problem of a mission that cannot be attained. It's trying to manage healthcare. It's trying to manage hospitalization. It's trying to figure out what optimal levels of, infection, testing, hospitalizations are, instead of narrowing the scope of what you're supposed to do. And in the case of the CDC, the scope is to identify a contagious disease and provide individuals, the public, with the tools and the capabilities to test and to isolate. And in cases of a very deadly disease, the government should get involved in testing and isolating people who have the disease. But that's it. It's not about manufacturing tests, which the CDC got in the business of doing. It's not about an endless stream of diseases out there. It's about deadly contagious diseases. That's the only thing the CDC should be worried about. Not about public health, not about other aspects of health, not even about really, in a free market at least, not even about hospital capacity. Hospital capacity should be a worry and a concern of hospitals. Now, we don't live in a free market. So it's hard to say the government should intervene when the government is regulating hospital capacity, when the government doesn't allow the market to adjust hospital capacity, when the government basically controls hospital capacity. So yes, the CDC has to manage that today, but it should get out of that business. State regulators, federal regulators should get out of the business of telling hospitals how many beds they can have, what kind of emergency facilities they can construct. They should get out of the business of, particularly private hospitals, of telling private hospitals what they can and cannot do. So the CDC, should not be in the business of telling people to mask up or not to mask up. It should not be in the business of forcing airlines to mask or not to mask. It shouldn't be in the business of telling people to vaccinate or not to vaccinate. In a free market, the CDC could provide data because it has access to a lot of data. It can provide information. It can even provide general recommendations based on their physicians. But those recommendations shouldn't be to us, the public. What do we know? They should be recommendations to doctors, to hospitals, to clinics. And then we as the public should be guided by our doctor. And yeah, it's really important who you choose as your doctor. So what needs to be restructured is the whole conception of the CDC. One of the complaints about the CDC that people have made is it didn't have enough budget. No, my argument is it had way too much budget, has way too much money, way too much power, way too much influence, and its scope of operations is way too large. Focus. Infectious diseases, deadly infectious diseases. Testing, isolating, data, broad recommendations to doctors, clinics, and hospitals. That's it. Instead, let me read to you some of the recommendations. You need to share scientific findings and data faster. Yes, but again, with whom and for what? And only reason this is required today is because all this research is being funded by the government, but it shouldn't be. Okay, so release scientific findings and data more quickly in response to the need for information and actions, and be transparent about agencies' current level of understanding. Yeah, be honest, be transparent. That goes back to the state secrets. What the CDC knows should not be a secret. The CDC should be 100% transparent about what it knows, what it doesn't know, what it's erred, what it's made mistakes about. So that's good. Prioritize public health communication. And a lot of this is about communication. Translate science into practical, easy to understand policy. No. CDC should not be involved in policy. The CDC should explain what's going on, what's happening, should provide the data. Again, should make sure that testing is happening and people are being isolated that need to be isolated, and that's it. And to the extent that there's a lot of data and they're accumulating a lot of data, release that data. Translate science into practical, easy to understand policy should be done by local authorities, should be done by private individuals, should be done by doctors, should be done by scientific, organizations. And there can be competition around that, about figuring out what the right behavior should be. The government should have no policy around these things. They want to implement a standardized policy development process for implementing guidance documents that would be vetted appropriately. I don't even know what that means, but a lot of this has to do with We need to be better communicators. This is the next one. Prioritize public health communication. Prioritize and enhance public-facing health communication practices and staff expertise. Yeah, they could have done a much better job communicating. No question. But that's not the failure. And again, it's not clear to me that it's the CDC that should be communicating these things. They should provide information and data, and we, individuals, should be responsible for ourselves. We'll get to individual responsibility in a minute. Promote results-based partnerships. Whoops. Article just disappeared on me. Where did it go? There it is. Work more effectively with our public health partners to accomplish result-oriented goals and work to address the limitations of a siloed approach to solving major public health problems. Develop a workplace prepared for future emergencies. Again, I mean, this all sounds like McKinsey came in, some consultant came in and gave the 5 bullet points on how to make the CDC more effective. But what is the job of the CDC? What's the strategy? What's the purpose? And how do we limit the CDC to its purpose instead of, driving policy, instead of, driving every decision an individual makes, instead of driving all that? Shouldn't it just be sticking to what it's supposed to be doing and what it's responsible for doing? So limit, shrink, get government out of the way. And one of the complaints, I read this in one of these articles about this restructuring. So the CDC has been criticized of its different policies, lift quantities, impose quantities, all this stuff, and it changes its mind all the time and it goes back and forth. But one of the biggest criticisms they have, and this is the problem that the CDC faces, right? And this is, I think, the problem we all face. One of the criticisms from doctors and public health experts is that the agency is embracing personal responsibility over public health when it is responsible for the latter. And this is the problem with public health, is there is no such thing as public health. All there is individual responsibility. And what the agency should be embracing fully, and it's never embraced, not really, is personal responsibility, individual responsibility. And providing individuals with the data, with the knowledge, with the information, with the menu of options, and let individuals and their doctors make decisions for themselves. That was always should have been what was done. Providing data, information, testing capabilities. I think the state has a role in isolating with a deadly disease. But in this case, they completely screwed up the testing and isolating. But beyond that, all it is data, information, options. No policy. Let individuals and doctors and health professionals make decisions for themselves. And I don't want to get into arguments about what the particular policies, what the particular options, all this stuff, because did they produce misinformation and so on? I mean, were they right or were they wrong? They were wrong often, but so's everybody. Your doctor's not going to be wrong sometimes. They're going to be wrong too. So the fact that experts made mistakes means nothing to me. I still want experts, and lots of them. I just don't want experts running the world. I want to be able to choose my experts. I want to get guidance from the experts I choose. And I want those experts to be incredibly knowledgeable with a lot of information. All right. So that those are the topics I have. Let's see what the situation is with the super chat. It's not great. We're not even halfway to where we need to be, but we did get some help from Campbell Kelly with $50. Campbell writes, "Thank you, Iran. Since I found you over 18 months ago, I've read both Rand's Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, as well as several of her other books. After addressing my values, I declined an offer to medical school and have followed my love for classical music and the piano." Wow, that's terrific. I love that. I love people pursuing their passion, taking risk. That is a super risky career. Very few people in the end of the day make a living from classical music and piano, right? But particularly when you're young, you got to take those risks and you got to try, and you might fail. You can always go back to medical school. You can always go back to doing something else, but you got to take the risk and take the shot at your highest values, at the things most important to you, the things that are potentially bringing you the greatest happiness. You've got to go for it when you're young. And I mean, generally in life, you should go for it, but particularly when you're young, when you've got a lot of time to correct, you got a lot of time to adjust. Right? But so happy to hear that. So happy to know that I had a positive influence, and I hope you're happy with the decision. It looks like Campbell is Australian, so because these are 50 Australian dollars. So that's great. Hopefully see you in Australia one of these days when somebody invites me to go and give a talk in Australia. Love to visit you guys. All right, we've raised about $270. We've still got 380 or so to go to make our goal. This is, the Super Chat is both a way to ask me questions and to support the Iran Book Show, support my time, the effort that goes into producing all these shows, even when I'm on the road, trying to do as many shows as I can. So feel free to jump in. And, maybe the Super Chat is better at night. Maybe I get more money at night. We'll have to, part of the issue here is I'm trying to figure out when the best time of day to do these shows is. We'll keep experimenting. We'll keep saying. All right, Ashton, am I a mysterious figure to you? Am I a mysterious figure to you? In a sense, yeah. I don't think we've ever met. You're a substantial supporter of the show through the Super Chat. You've given Iran Book Show a lot of money over the last few months. And I don't know who you are. So to the extent that that's a mystery, yeah, that's a mystery. But a mysterious figure sounds sounds too mysterious. But I mean, a lot of the people who give money here on the show are people I don't know personally. And it would be great. It's great. One of the great advantages of coming to OCON, the Objectives Conferences once a year, is I get to meet a lot of you guys, and that's a lot of fun and a real pleasure. One day when we're big enough, right, when the number of subscribers is over, is more substantial, maybe we could do Iran Book Show gatherings or Iran Book Show conferences, or Iran Book Show seminars, and I can invite people who are supporters of the show to attend those. So it'll be just for supporters of the show and stuff like that. That would be fun, and that would be a way to meet and to hang out and to do some stuff. So, but we need more people, because if I did it today, given any particular week or anything, it'd just be a smaller number. But Brookfest, a Brookfest, I like that. I mean, let me know if you're interested. If you really are interested and you'd be willing to pay money to attend something like that, we can probably organize it. All right, Alan says, general support, thank you for your reasoned thinking, and I agree that there is way too much government in everything. Thank you, Alan, absolutely. And way too little thinking in everything. That's the more important, I think, point. At the end of the day, we don't blame government, we blame our culture for not being a thinking culture. It's the thinking that is missing. Thomas asks, America is called the nation of the Enlightenment, which is true. But now it is also the nation of an aggressive fundamentalist Protestant Christianity. Evangelicals are now a quarter of America's population. This is a big problem. Is this a big problem? Yeah, I mean, there's no question it's a big problem. I think, counter to many people out there, I think religion is, put it this way, religion is not on the rise in the sense of numbers. Religion is in decline in a sense of numbers. Church attendance is in decline in a sense of numbers. But what is true today is that religion has become more political. Religion has become associated with politics, and in a real bizarre occurrence. The evangelicals are associated now with Trump. You couldn't think of a character who would be less appealing to evangelicals, right? He's a philanderer. He is he's vulgar. He's clearly a liar. In every dimension, he's the kind of character that you would think, if Christianity means anything, I don't think it really does, but if it means anything, that they would shun. Indeed, I think that a lot of conservatives, Christian conservatives, are bewildered by the popularity of Trump. They don't understand it because he's exactly the opposite of what they would have expected and what to be somebody. I mean, remember when Bill Clinton was president and the religious right was all about character first? It's all about character. What's really important is character. And Trump has the exact opposite. So the problem with religion today is the fact that those who are still religious are, I think, more religious maybe than they were certainly 200 years ago. Certainly at the founding, I think America, the religionists are more religious today than they were 200 plus years ago. But that they're more they're more today than 50 years ago. The evangelicals and the religionists, Christian and the Catholics, this is true Catholic as well, that they are more political and more religious. They're more adamant about their religion, and they are more committed. So, for example, the Founding Fathers, some of them were religious. I think most of them were deists. Some of them were religious, but the population was religious. But the population was fine with separation of church and state at the federal level, at the state level, and there was. And some states didn't separate church and state, and that was only separated later in the 19th century. But the country did move towards the separation of church and state. Today, the religionists, and the religionists supported it because they believed that the separation of church and state would support their religion. It would give them more religious freedom. Today, the religionists, the modern Christians, want to do away with the separation of church and state. They want to embrace the unity of church and state. They want to bring religion into the state. Just read the National Conservative agenda, which is to bring Christianity into the state in America, to make it the guiding light of the state in America, in Judaism in Israel, Christianity in America. The entire National Conservative movement and everybody who signed the National Conservative List of Principles, which was a list of, 20, 30, 40 of the leading intellectuals of the right. It wasn't Yoav Hazoni. It was 20, 30, 40 Christians who signed that document. And you can go and find it. I did a whole show about it. It wasn't just a bunch of Jews signing it. It was a bunch of Christians signing it. And they were the more moderates. Because if you look at the Catholics, the Patrick Deneen, the Sohab Amari, the Vermeulen at Harvard, they are far more adamant. They're far more extreme in their belief that Catholicism and Christianity should be brought into government and imposed on us. So that's the challenge. The challenge is the Christians today believe they have abandoned the Founding Fathers, they've abandoned the Constitution, they've abandoned the principles of individual rights, and they believe today in integration of religion with the state. And that is what should really, really scare us. That should be the thing that worries us. And I think it's the most powerful movement today. I think in terms of long-term political power, I think the National Conservatives and others of their ilk are the most powerful political movement long-term in America. They will rally the most people around them. It's truly scary. It's truly scary. Thanks, Thomas. Let's see. We got a $50 one. God, why can't I read this? The Real Mr. Meat. I don't know what that means. The Real Mr. Meat, $50. Thank you, Real Mr. Meat. I'm sure you've said it before, But what do you think of Netanyahu's economic and foreign policies? Oh, God. Yeah, I mean, I've said it many times over many years. I do not like Netanyahu. I've never been really a fan of Netanyahu's. I think Netanyahu is a great speechwriter, deliverer. He gives great speech. I think he writes great books. His books are excellent. His books on terrorism are some of the best books in the world. His speeches are fantastic, principled. Some of the best speeches you'll hear from any politician in English. All of this in English. But as a politician, as a prime minister, he has compromised, sold out, negotiated with terrorists, not moved the country towards more freedom, not liberated the economy. He's been a complete sellout. When Netanyahu was finance minister, not prime minister, just finance minister, he did some excellent things. He liberated a significant portion of the Israeli economy. He moved it towards greater free markets. He was great. As soon as he became prime minister, he stopped doing that. As soon as he became prime minister, he started selling favors to pressure groups. So I am a huge opponent of Netanyahu, both on foreign policy, on terrorism, and on economics. He has been a massive disappointment. And by the way, this was true from early in his career. Netanyahu became prime minister, I think, for the first time in 1996. And after writing this brilliant book about terrorism and never negotiating with terrorism, and really excellent, one of the first things he did as prime minister is negotiate with Arafat and cut a deal with him and compromise with him. And it was like, all right, you're dead to me now. You just wrote this great book and you do the exact opposite. And then later on, over the last 12 or so years when he's been prime minister, Israel is not moved in a positive, it's not moved from a policy perspective in a positive direction in any dimension. It did not take out the Iranian nuclear threat. It lost 2 wars. It lost several wars to Hezbollah and to Hamas. It did not destroy and fundamentally destroy and demilitarize Gaza or South Lebanon, where Hezbollah is. So Netanyahu has done little for the safety of Israel, and has done little to liberalize its economy as prime minister. Again, when he was finance minister, really good, but a huge compromiser. All right, let's see, we got a few more Super Chat questions coming in. Thank you. We're now up to about 425, so we're $225 short still of our goal. So there's still room for another couple of $100 questions or $50 questions so we can get there quickly. Hiram asks, do you think it's good to make analogies between the Hellenistic period, Cain and Abel, documented accounts of Second Temple destruction, 70 CE, and inflation in relation to trouble maintaining food? Wow, I'm not sure I understand the question. Look, generally I think if you can draw principles out of the analogies, if there's something about the period that you can say, here's something that seems to repeat itself in history. Whenever this happens, these bad things happen. Whenever a state becomes an extensive welfare state, whenever they devalue their currency, these bad things happen, then I think it's useful to do. Or if you're trying to draw analogies around specific human behaviors, specific human traits, I don't know, envy I'm thinking of Cain and Abel. Envy is really, really bad, and the story of Cain and Abel is primarily a story about envy. And and the disastrous consequences of envy and the violence that envy leads to, and you can draw from different periods of history the evil of envy, then yes. So, but you have to draw the principle. Just taking a random set of historical events and trying to analogize between them, and to analogize over more than a couple of principles, to analogize over parallels in history, I think is a mistake. But if you look at the principles, you can learn a lot, and you need to do that. You need to look at history. You need to study history. We all don't know enough history. Because we can't know our future, we can't know our present without knowing history, without knowing what worked, what didn't work, what principles, what certain behavior leads to. And we know that from history. So I'm all for studying more history so we can learn more from history so we can make our present much better. Ashton writes, I know you don't play video games. I don't. But I think you have to do a review of BioShock because of its criticism of Ayn Rand. A lot of people I tried to talk objectivism with are turned off automatically because they played BioShock. I've had BioShock has been a mixed blessing because I know a lot of people who, because of BioShock, went and read Ayn Rand and ultimately became objectivists. So BioShock was actually an entry point for a lot of people to objectivism. I don't understand why anybody, because of BioShock, would be turned off of Ayn Rand ultimately, because BioShock doesn't present objectivism, but BioShock in a sense presents the future when objectivism has failed, and it presents subjectivism as a failure. So I did review at the time when BioShock came out. I did a bunch of interviews about BioShock. I actually was on an interview, I think, with the creator of BioShock. So I did a bunch of stuff on BioShock. What was it, 2015, 2014, 15, 16, something around that. The rapture fell because Ryan fails to follow and apply objectivism, but it's not clear that the writer of BioShock even knows objectivism. But it's impossible for me to review it because I'm not going to play it. So one of you who plays the game should do a review of it and promote it. But look, BioShock's a game, and anybody who takes a game so seriously as to reject the whole philosophy because of a game is kind of silly. Because the whole point of the game is to have conflict, and the whole point, and the writer of the game is clearly non-objectivist. He rejects objectivism, so of course he's not going to present objectivism well. So it's like, you want to learn about objectivism, let's take a book that critiques objectivism and read it and evaluate objectivism based on it. And let's not read the original. Let's not read what objectivism actually says. Let's just read the critics. And from what I heard, BioShock is very well done. I mean, one of the things that would be great is if some of you who are objectivists and who know video games and maybe can design video games, if you guys actually designed video games that were based on objectivism, that were exciting and fun, and it promoted objectivist values, that would be terrific. Be another venue to promote the ideas. Colt Savage asks, I would love to discuss these topics with you in person. Used to Protestants and Catholics were at each other's throats. Now they have unified against secularism. If religion becomes more of the focus, could this divide come back? I expect the divide would come back once secularism is defeated. Yes, there's no question. Look, Catholicism and Protestants justifiably are in conflict. They're in conflict about specifics of Christian dogma. They're in conflict about the entire approach to Christianity. I mean, Catholicism is a far more dogmatic approach, a far more academic, a far more intellectual approach to Christianity. Catholics are intellectuals. All the leading intellectuals of the conservative movement, not all, but a significant number of them, I'd say easily a majority, are Catholics and Jews. Right? It's the funny thing about it. Protestants are more emotional, and their connection to religion is more emotional. And that creates all kinds of conflicts of interpretations of how to behave, of what to do. A lot of things that Protestants do, Catholics think of as the opposite of religion, of Christianity. I mean, proper Catholics don't consider some forms of Protestantism even to be Christian. So I think the conflict between Catholics and Protestants comes back once secularism is put to the side. There's no question. And it's bloody because there's no way to resolve disputes. There's no reason. Reason is not the basis for resolving disputes. There's just whose gun is bigger, who's willing to engage in more violence. The most violent wars in human history maybe the most violent war in human history, certainly in European history, was the 30-Year War. On a per capita basis, more people died in that war than I think in World War I or World War II. And it was what? Catholics and Protestants fighting. Now, there was also some issues of political power, but to a large extent, it was about Catholics being pissed off at Protestants and the other way around. John Wayne asked, have you watched The History of Philosophy Rap by Rucker Ali? As I said, I watched it a long time ago, but I've been paid to do a review of it, so I have to watch it properly. And no, I'm traveling right now. That is high on my priority list for when I get back. So I've got 2 television shows, a movie, and the Rucker History of Philosophy. I've got those 4 things that I owe you guys, but I will do it when I get back home. While I travel, it's difficult for me to watch this stuff and then review it. All right, I'm going to do some of the super. I'm going to do the $5 to $10 super chats. Some of these are from 2 days ago. Some of them are from today. We are still about $200 short. So if somebody wants to step in and get us to the 650 goal, that'd be terrific. But we've raised $433 or so. All right. Michael asks, do many people chase abuse subconsciously, particularly women? I don't know if it's particularly women. It's possible. I'm not a psychologist. But yes, I do think it is a phenomenon where people, in a sense, what are they? They feel guilty. They know they should pay for their sins. Think about original sin, the dogma of original sin. Think about ideas about not being selfish and the immorality of being self-interested and so on. And you can see people building up an inventory of guilt and then psychologically demanding punishment for that guilt and doing that through, asking to be abused. Now, I don't think that usually gets the point of physical abuse. I think it's often mentally abuse. But, so if this question is a woman asking for it, no, certainly not. And I think it's both men and women who often seek abusive relationships, seek abuse because they're trying to punish themselves for some sin that they believe they committed that is in their subconscious. At least that's my understanding of psychology. And that comes from Christianity and primarily from altruism. Altruism is responsible for many, many, many of the psychological issues that people have in our world. Okay, Michael also asks, do you see both parties moving in an individualist direction in the next 50 years, as bumpy as the road will be? I don't know if I see the political parties moving in an individualist direction. I think that at some point we will achieve some kind of crescendo of collectivism, and after that, I think the population will be moving in a more individualistic direction and dragging the political parties in that direction, kicking and screaming. Also, Michael, what's the best way to avoid losers in life? Well, I think the best way to avoid losers in life is to really be just in your evaluation of people, and to be very aware of who you're interacting with and who you engaged with, and to just to be alert to the fact that some people are losers and to avoid them and ignore them. I don't think there's any secret sauce. It's just be aware that there are such people as losers, and be aware that you don't want to deal with losers. You don't want to be engaged with losers, but you have to be objective about it. I mean, what comes to mind is people's lack of objectivity with regarding to somebody like Trump, who is a grand loser, and people seem to be committed to him. Ashton, do you think that American culture today celebrates and romanticizes white-collared workers more than blue-collared workers? I think it depends on who in